Nintendo just wrapped up their July Direct, which, as we found out yesterday, was actually a partner direct, meaning that there was no first-party representation going on, at least not in the traditional sense. There's one game that kind of breaks this rule a little bit we'll talk about, and it was fine. There are some specific games that I am very excited about, particularly the kind of bookend announcements at the start and finish where games very much my kind of energy, and the middle was a little bit more of a mixed bag. Part of why I think this one drag on a little bit, and this was a concern I had going into this direct, knowing it was a partner one, and so soon after the release of the Switch 2, very heavy emphasis on a lot of games that have been around already on other systems, but are now making their way to the Switch 2 now that the system is more powerful than the original Switch, which is something to be excited about. There are people who have been waiting to play these games. Maybe they didn't have access to a PlayStation or Xbox before and they've been focused entirely on the Switch, and now they have a way to play some of these titles. Stuff like Persona 3 Reload, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Apex Legends, Yakuza Kiwami 2, and Star Wars Outlaws, all of which are pretty good games. I mean, I don't really actually have that many opinions on Apex Legends because I don't just play multiplayer shooters much, but Persona 3 Reload and Yakuza Kiwami 2 are both excellent games that I love, and Star Wars Outlaws, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated games of last year and something that more people should try out because it's actually really good, especially now they patched some of its earlier issues near the start of the game. And so again, I don't want to completely just undercut the excitement of like, oh, these are now playable on a Nintendo platform, but these are games that have been around a while and available on other platforms for a while, which is something that we do know has been an issue for some multiplat titles coming to Switch 2 now, because yeah, it's cool you can now play these games on Switch, but there have been options before, and that just doesn't drive quite as much excitement as brand new releases, which there was stuff that we saw at this presentation as well. A number of games that we've known about for a little while now that are just getting confirmation for the Switch 2, or just getting their release reiterated. The upcoming remaster of Final Fantasy Tactics, for instance, they showed off a quick trailer for, once again saying that it is coming to Switch 1 and Switch 2. Chronos: The New Dawn, which is a third-person over-the-shoulder shooter coming from Bloober Team. We've known about that for a little while, and now we know it's coming to Switch 2 as well. The upcoming 2D Shinobi game, Borderlands 4, some yearly sports titles, and we did also get a couple of new third-party reveals, or at least new to me, ones that maybe, have been announced elsewhere, but I just didn't catch wind of yet until this direct, with a brand new Katamari game called Once Upon Katamari, Chillin' by the Fire, which was a shadow drop game for the Switch 2 that is, you build a campfire and hang out around it and chill, which actually didn't look too bad to me. I'm probably gonna check that out today. And a 3D adventure game where you play as a little mouse with a frog backpack that I don't actually know how good it is going to be, but just that concept alone does have me very curious, although that is one of the games that's going to be slated a bit farther down the line with just a generic 2026 release date for the time being. Now, of all these announcements in the middle, the one game that did make a very quick appearance that might have caught some people off guard, since it wouldn't necessarily occur to them to think of it as a third-party game, the next Hyrule Warriors. Age of Imprisonment, which was announced back at the Switch 2 Direct when they were first revealing a whole bunch of games. We got another quick look at it. This is technically a third-party partner title because this is being developed in association with Koei Tecmo, particularly the team that does all the Dynasty Warrior games. They've made the Hyrule Warriors titles, and so while this is a first-party IP, it is technically a third-party game, which is why we got to have a little quick snippet here, which didn't actually give us a ton more info. We saw a little bit more gameplay, a little bit more stuff of action, tiny little teases here and there. The one thing I will say that's very interesting about this now being the second trailer for this game that has my attention is we still haven't seen Link yet, which makes perfect sense knowing when this game is going to take place relative to Tears of the Kingdom. If you've played that game, you'll know the plot setup here and why Link is not around. But I've been very skeptical of whether or not they're going to completely leave him out, especially with how Age of Calamity was handled, where there was all kinds of additional cameos and characters showing up that canonically would not have made sense, but they did anyways. Although they did use the word canonical story for this game, meaning that the events of this game should be as they actually happen in Tears of the Kingdom's backstory, meaning that unless they just include him as a fun, unlockable character that has no story relevance, we might actually have a Hyrule Warriors game that doesn't have Link in it, which personally I'm fine with. I respect the move, especially because it does make sense for the storyline of the game, and the cast we've seen so far does look good. I am curious to see them fill it out a lot more though, because, at least based on what story tidbits we have from Tears of the Kingdom, there's not a ton of established characters to work with, at least not nearly as many as we've seen in other Warriors games. So I'm curious if we're going to be seeing a lot more original characters, if they're going to stick to a smaller roster. Definitely something I want to learn more about. Now, as for the big bookend announcements, what they opened and what they closed with, the hard opener was Monster Hunter Stories 3, which visually does look a little bit different from what they did in the first two. The first two Stories games, if you played them, were very Pokemon themed. The main characters were young adventurers that had, little baby monsters they would use in combat, whereas what we saw in this trailer looked aged up a little bit. It actually had a little bit more of like a modern Zelda vibe, especially with the falling shot that's very reminiscent of Tears of the Kingdom. The main character is an adult. The monsters look a little aged up as well. We didn't actually see any combat in action, so I am curious if maybe as part of this style shift, we're going to see combat change as well. But it is wearing that Stories titling, so personally, I'm hoping it actually does stick with the turn-based party-style combat of those games, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. All in all, not a bad opening surprise. As for the closer, we got two back-to-back announcements from Square Enix, both of which are HD 2D style titles, which is something I'm personally very excited about. We got the reveal of a brand new IP they're releasing called The Adventures of Elliot, and then a new entry in the Octopath Traveler series. Now, Adventures of Elliot is a little bit different from what they've done so far because while most HD 2D games have been turn-based RPGs, this is an action RPG. It looks very reminiscent to me actually of like older Mana games, not necessarily in tone because it does feel a little bit darker than those. It's not nearly as bright and colorful, but it is a top-down 2D action game where you have multiple different weapons to choose from. Also because of the fact that HD 2D creates that kind of 3D look a little bit, it reminded me a lot of the earlier Ys games as well. This was one of the more surprising titles that, just based on the snippets we're seeing, I'm very excited about. It is slated for sometime next year, but it does have a demo launching later today. I was hoping to put some time into that before recording this video, but it is not in the eShop yet, and I just don't have the ability to wait right now, so I plan on checking that out and might even throw up a quick video on it because I'm very curious about this game. But of everything we saw at today's show, this was probably the most pleasant surprise to me. This is just a style of game that I'm very into. I dig the aesthetic, the character designs. I like that they're experimenting with HD 2D and other formats and not just sticking to traditional turn-based RPGs, although I'll happily take more of those as well. This was my personal highlight of the show. And then after that, we got the announcement of a new Octopath Traveler title, which is not 3, but instead Octopath Traveler 0. And what was very interesting to me about this particular reveal is that if you've played the mobile game they released, which was Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent, this looks very similar to that. Not the exact same, but larger cast of characters. There's one shot they show in a battle where you just have a massive lineup of people, and combat incorporates having 8 characters active all at the same time, 4 in a front line, 4 in a back line. We don't know based on the snippets we saw whether or not this is going to act the exact same as combat in Champions of the Continent, but it certainly looks very similar, which is something that I actually am for. I really liked that concept of actually having all 8 characters at once, though it looks like the roster in this game might be larger than that. And so I was actually a little disappointed even when Octopath Traveler 2 didn't embrace some version of this where you're using everyone. So happy to see that move here. It also looks like it's adding in some additional elements like town building and such. I'm very curious if this is going to end up being revealed as some kind of multiplat, not necessarily live service, but more mobile style game. Maybe this is just taking some of the concepts from the mobile title and are doing a more traditional single player title with it. We don't have a ton of details just yet. It is supposed to be releasing later this year. It does not have a demo like Elliot's getting, although that might happen closer to release. This is one where I am excited about it, but I think have a lot more questions based on just what I'm seeing parallel here with other games, and how this one is going to actually be bringing together these styles of like the traditional single player Octopaths and that mobile release. And again, all 3 of these releases, much more my kind of energy and are all games that I'm excited about. I get that it is not for everyone. The other thing I want to point out about these though is that while we're still waiting on confirmation for at least Elliot, it does look like both Monster Hunter Stories 3 and Octopath Traveler 0 are multi-platform games that don't have any kind of exclusivity. Nintendo themselves during the announcements said that these are games coming to Nintendo Switch 2 and not necessarily exclusively. I'm curious if Elliot's going to get any kind of confirmation down the line as well, but that does paint a picture of how, again, cool looking games, and there are some that I think are very worth being excited for, but outside of Age of Imprisonment, we had a very heavy focus on things that are ultimately multi-platform, which is the direction a lot more third parties are going. Like, we know for a fact that Square Enix and Sega are both interested in trying to bring their games to more platforms as quickly as possible and not do things like timed exclusivity much anymore. So seeing these games that are, making their way to the system either because they were on everything else for a while and can now run on a Switch, or are upcoming brand new games and they're coming to Switch, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. It's something that is worth being excited about, but especially for people that have now just bought a Switch 2 and are looking to have the library grow of experiences that they can only experience on that system. I just kind of wish we had like one or two things they could point to that were true exclusives, which again, Imprisonment I think was the main game they were leaning on for that, but I think people want just a little bit more assurance than that. What we've had so far for the system, fantastic. Mario Kart World, great. Donkey Kong Bonanza, incredible, possibly game of the year. But I think just as people are paying, $500 for a brand new system, they just want to be able to have a few more games to point to and go, oh, here's the reason I'm upgrading to the console. And sadly, I don't think third party alone is always going to cut it, especially with all the game key card stuff going on where, I find myself gravitating to other systems more now when it comes to grabbing physical copies because I want a true physical copy. It's just hard not to walk away from third party focus on the Switch right now, just a little bit more of a mixed feeling. So yeah, not the strongest partner direct they've ever done, certainly not the strongest direct in general. There is some stuff where I think if specifically you're a JRPG fan, there are some things to be very excited for that we got to see snippets of, but I definitely don't think this is one of those directs where they had something for everyone. And also just some things that I'm kind of surprised we didn't see happen at this direct. For instance, Level 5 didn't show up at all, which I really thought we'd be getting another look at Professor Layton sometime soon. That's supposed to be releasing this year. Deca Police is a title they've repeatedly pushed back and is now coming out next year, and I was hoping to see maybe some kind of update on that. There's just a couple different major third parties that are working on Nintendo Switch centric stuff that I thought could maybe show up and just didn't this time around. So I still think overall the Switch 2 is going to have a pretty solid first year. I just really wanted this direct to help push a little bit more reasons why you want this specific system over other options out there, and this is just not really what happened today. Those are my thoughts, at least. Let me know what you all think down below in the comments. Did you enjoy the direct? Were there any specific games you were excited about? Were there ports that you have been holding off on for other systems that you're now happy to see finally playable on a Switch console? Let me know down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you all very soon.